sailors didn't like the Cape Coast at all. There was no natural harbors where one could hide from storms or anything. You were out there at the mercy of nature. So it was the ideal setting for the legend of the Flying Dutchman.
Minutes ago, whispers of the cursed ship, the Flying Dutchman, have surfaced again. This ghostly vessel, damned to roam the seas for eternity by a grim pact with the devil, has haunted sailors' tales for over 4 centuries. Even a man destined to be king claimed he saw its eerie silhouette against the stormy skies. What if it's lurking nearby, waiting to be seen once more? Join us as we explore the eerie tale of the most haunted ghost ship lost in the depths of the sea. The horrible secret of the Flying Dutchman. The story of the Flying Dutchman is one of the most famous ghost ship legends, fascinating people all over the world. This tale has been around for more than 400 years and has become even more popular, especially after it was featured in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Over time, many people have claimed to have seen this ghostly ship, including someone who later became the King of England. This horror story has inspired poets, playwrights, and artists. But the real truth behind the Flying Dutchman is still something that people argue about. As the fog rolled in thicker with each passing moment, whispers of a cursed ship echoed through the mist. As the captain's words echoed across the turbulent waves, a sudden, eerie calm fell over the ocean. Some say it was at this moment that the Flying Dutchman was cursed, never to make port again, forever to sail the oceans. Legend has it that the ship appears with a ghostly glow, signifying its eternal struggle against the winds and waves. The crew, turned into ghosts, were bound to the ship, destined to never see their families or their homes again. This cursed voyage turned the Flying Dutchman into a spectral vessel, a haunting reminder of the perils at sea and the fate awaiting those who defy the natural order. Over the centuries, the legend of the Flying Dutchman grew. Sightings were reported by many who sailed the same treacherous waters. Some saw it as an omen. To spot the ghostly ship was to forewarn of a storm or disaster. Others saw it more poetically, as a symbol of mankind's battle against the forces of nature, a testament to the sailors' courage and their confrontation with the unknown. These tales were often shared among sailors to pass the long hours at sea, blending fact with folklore, weaving a rich tapestry of naval tradition. Each telling added layers to the story, embroidered with the fears and hopes of those who lived their lives on the rolling deep. This rich tradition of storytelling not only preserved the history and myths of old, but also served as a coping mechanism for the sailors. By sharing these stories, they could face their fears together, finding comfort in the camaraderie that came with knowing others shared their superstitions and experiences. The Flying Dutchman story, like many other sea myths, remains a compelling tale of mystery and the supernatural. It captures the essence of the human spirit and its unyielding quest for adventure, despite the immense risks and dangers that lie in wait. As long as the seas are sailed, stories of the Flying Dutchman and other maritime legends will continue to be told, reminding us of the allure and peril of the ocean's depths. This wasn't the worst part of the story. When the captain turned around, instead of seeing a defiant crew member, he found himself face to face with the devil himself, standing calmly in the rain with steam rising from his figure. With a smile, the devil agreed to the captain's challenge and declared that he would take the captain's soul as payment. The devil doomed the captain and his crew to roam the seas forever, bound by a curse until the end of time. However, he offered a small chance for redemption. If Vanderdecken could find a woman who truly loved him, the curse would be broken and he and his crew would be freed. Every 7 years, the captain was allowed to go ashore to search for this love. Let's dive into a tale from the sea where legends come alive. Encounters with the Phantom Ship. During a fierce storm, the ship sank at the point where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans meet. Miraculously, the ship returned, now manned by the ghostly figures of the Flying Dutchman's crew. For centuries, sailors have reported seeing this ghost ship, sometimes just below the surface or even sailing beneath their own ships. These sightings were reported all over the world. The story might seem like a scary tale meant to teach lessons about pride and the consequences of foolishness. Interestingly, many sailors from the 18th to the 20th centuries reported seeing the ghostly ship, often with more than one witness. The first written account appeared in a book from 1790 by John MacDonald. Over time, more sailors shared their encounters with the cursed ship, always seen as a bad omen. In 1835, a British ship nearly collided with a huge ship that appeared suddenly in a big storm. The ghost ship came out of nowhere, racing toward them with all sails open. Just when a collision seemed certain, the ship vanished into thin air. Another curious event occurred in 1881 when the future King of England, George V, was a young midshipman on the British Navy ship HMS Bacchante. While anchored off the coast of Australia, he and his brother saw the Flying Dutchman surrounded by a strange red glow. They could see the structure of the ship clearly, but moments later, it was gone. Tragically, after seeing the ghost ship, one of the crew members who witnessed it fell from a mast and died the next day. Fast forward to 1939, when people on a beach in South Africa were amazed to see the Flying Dutchman sailing along the coast. The local newspaper covered the event, describing how the ship seemed to be moving steadily along before disappearing right in front of the crowd. Similar sightings followed, like one in Table Bay, where people watched as the ghost ship slowly faded away. Then in 1951, author Nicholas Montserrat, who served as a Royal Navy officer during World War II, claimed he too had seen the Flying Dutchman. His story added to the growing list of ghostly sightings. But was this the strangest part? Not yet. It raises the question, can we really believe these stories, even when a future British king claims to have seen the ghost ship? Though it's hard to prove these stories are true, people have tried to find evidence of Captain Hendrik van der Decken, the supposed captain of the Flying Dutchman, but without success. Some think the legend might be based on a real Dutch captain named Bernard Fokke. He was famous for incredibly fast voyages, so fast that people thought he must have made a deal with some dark forces. For example, in 1678, Fokke's journey from Java to the Netherlands took only 10 days, a trip that normally took 3 months. This fueled rumors of supernatural help. Still, despite all the tales and legends, there's no solid proof, leaving us to wonder where the line between myth and reality really lies. The Cape of Good Hope has long been known for causing shipwrecks. This dangerous reputation started all the way back in 1488, when a Portuguese explorer named Bartolomeu Dias discovered it. Dias himself wrote about the unpredictable weather, strong ocean currents, and the jagged, rocky shores that made it risky to sail near the southern tip of Africa. At first, this area was fittingly called the Cape of Storms, but later, King John II of Portugal renamed it the Cape of Good Hope, maybe to make it sound more positive and encourage sailors to keep going. Next, we sail into dangerous waters that test even the bravest sailors. Myth and reality in the sea's heart. Still, many ships tried to pass through these dangerous waters to save time on their long journeys. One of the most well-known captains was Van der Decken, who, according to legend, declared he would never return home. Even though the story of the Flying Dutchman might just be a spooky myth, it has kept alive the memory of reckless captains who led their crews to disaster. Stories of ghost ships, crewed by the dead, have been told for ages. Some people think these tales come from an old belief that the dead must cross a sea to reach the afterlife. This idea even inspired Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings, when the elves sailed to the lands of Aman. But if the Flying Dutchman is just a myth, how do we explain all the sightings of the ship? One possible explanation is something called the Fata Morgana phenomenon, which is an optical illusion similar to a mirage. This type of illusion can make a faraway ship look like it's floating above the water. Under certain weather conditions, sunlight can project an image of a ship from miles away, and people might not realize they're looking at a reflection, not the real thing. However, the log of HMS Bacchante tells a different story. When the Flying Dutchman was sighted, the sea was calm and the night was clear, which doesn't fit with the need for sunlight to create a Fata Morgana. Plus, other ships reported seeing the ghostly ship in stormy weather, making it even less likely that they were just seeing an illusion. So either Captain Van der Decken and his cursed crew have been sailing the lonely oceans for centuries, Or we're dealing with a really strange optical illusion that has even tricked British royalty. But this isn't the strangest part yet. There's more to uncover about the mysteries of the sea, and each twist raises more questions. He loved stories about the sea, especially ones filled with adventure and mystery. Out of all these ocean stories, one stands out above the rest. Something you've probably heard of before. It's the story of the Flying Dutchman. Maybe you've come across it as the Flying Dutchman in English, but there's more to this tale than just a name. What makes this story such a famous legend that's been passed down for almost 400 years? Let's dive in and take a closer look at this mysterious tale. Some stories, especially the eerie ones about strange creatures or unexplainable events, tend to be ignored by many. But the story of the Flying Dutchman takes us back to a time when being a sailor was incredibly tough. This was particularly true for those who sailed long distances. Back then, the Dutch were a major power in what we now call Indonesia, which they referred to as the East Indies. The East Indies were rich with spices and other goods that were in high demand in Northern Europe. However, getting these goods from the East Indies to Europe was no easy task. The Suez Canal, which now makes travel between these regions much quicker, didn't exist back then. Sailors had to brave dangerous waters, including the deadly Sea of Death and the treacherous Sea of Galicia, sailing between European territories and the British Isles. From there, they traveled down the coast of Portugal and continued toward the challenging waters off the African coast. As they moved further south, they had to pass the southern tip of Africa, where they faced the dangerous waters around the Cape of Good Hope and Cape Agulhas. Afterward, they'd enter the Indian Ocean and head toward the Dutch East Indies. The entire journey was full of hazards, from the stormy seas near France to the unpredictable waters near Portugal. But the Cape of Good Hope, once called the Cape of Storms, was one of the most dangerous places to sail. Here, cold waters from the South Atlantic clashed with the warmer Indian Ocean, creating violent storms and strong currents. Let's follow sailors as they face storms and seek legendary lands. The legendary tale of Cornelius Vander. Imagine navigating these waters with nothing but the power of the wind, as they did in the 16th century. If the wind was too strong, the ships would struggle, and if it was too weak, they could be stuck for weeks, waiting for the right conditions. These wooden ships, weighing around 500 to 600 tons, were large but fragile, making the sailors' journey even more perilous. Among these sailors, there was one man whose name became legendary, Cornelius Vander Teken Vander, also known as the Flying Dutchman. He was a feared and respected captain, notorious for pushing forward even in the worst of storms. He cared little for the lives of his crew, and his refusal to change course for a sick or injured sailor became part of his ruthless reputation. The legend places Vander around the late 1600s when he was sent on a journey from the Cape of Good Hope to Batavia to collect supplies before heading back to the Netherlands. The trip to Batavia went smoothly, but the return voyage was filled with trouble. As they approached Cape Needles, strong headwinds and storms began to hit. The crew begged him to take shelter in Table Bay, a common practice among captains during storms. But Vander refused. He was determined to keep going, despite the dangers ahead. In his defiance, Vander even fired a pistol into the stormy sky, daring the heavens to stop him. He swore that nothing could stand in his way. But according to the legend, shortly after this bold move, his ship sank, taking him and his entire crew down into the depths. People say that Vander's ship reappeared with him still at the helm, cursed to sail the seas for eternity. Forever lost, he searches for a captain brave enough to deliver a letter of his repentance, hoping to break free from his doomed fate. The story of the Flying Dutchman doesn't take place in the warm waters of the Caribbean with a rum-loving pirate, but instead near the Cape of Good Hope, between Cape Needles and the Northern Return. Some people even claim to have seen it as far as Iceland, though those stories are often dismissed. Most sightings of this ghost ship are reported in the southern seas, between Australia and the southern coast of Africa. It's said that every now and then, the outline of an old mariner's ship appears in the distance, slightly faded by time, but still the same ship. One story, in particular, stands out. It involves the British Royal Navy during a ceremonial voyage to show off their naval power. Their fleet sailed through waters under British control, like the coasts of Australia and parts of southern Africa. As they turned north toward the Mediterranean, something strange happened. Near the Cape of Good Hope, a lookout aboard HMS Inconstant shouted that a ghostly ship was ahead. The crew from HMS Inconstant, along with other ships like HMS Cleopatra and HMS Tourmaline, grabbed their binoculars. What they saw was a ship surrounded by a reddish mist, old in design, with its sails fully spread and lanterns glowing, silently moving just 200 yards away. Even though it moved calmly, the sight gave everyone chills. The ship seemed frozen in time, sailing smoothly with no crew visible, just that eerie mist swirling around. But that wasn't the worst part. After the ghost ship disappeared, not even causing a ripple in the water, a heavy mood fell over the sailors. The lookout who first spotted it tragically fell to his death shortly afterward. The commanding officer who had rushed to see it fell seriously ill and died on HMS Inconstant. The ship itself later caught fire and faced even more disasters as they approached the Mediterranean. Now let's see how ghostly ships have haunted their watchers. A brush with the Flying Dutchman. The legend of the Flying Dutchman says that anyone who sees it and doesn't follow certain sea traditions might face bad luck. This seemed to be true for the crew of HMS Inconstant, HMS Cleopatra, and the other ships. Even more, Prince George, who would later become King George V, known as the Sailor King, was aboard during this eerie trip. He recorded these strange events, making it one of the most mysterious stories in the history of the Royal Navy. This tale, tied to the legend of the Flying Dutchman, became a lasting part of sea folklore, full of mystery and tragedy. The two ships communicated using lights, because neither had a radio telegraph, which wasn't yet a requirement. Though not required, they kept sending messages using their lamps. The crew from Guarata sent out a light signal that everything was fine on board. But this wasn't the worst part. They were warned to watch out for the ocean currents and told about a few small problems involving the Mackin clan and Officer Phillips. Not long after, another ship named Talent sent a similar message, wishing them safe travels and using the old saying, Gatsbed. The ships shared hopes for good winds as they slowly drifted apart, sailing smoothly through the next few hours. Officer Phillips went back to his post on the bridge, looking out at the sea with his binoculars as night began to fall. Just when everything seemed calm, Phillips noticed a strange shape against the dark sky, right in Guarata's path. He couldn't believe what he saw and kept blinking, hoping to see clearer. He quickly called over another crew member to make sure he wasn't seeing things. They both agreed that they were looking at an ancient sailboat, strangely peaceful in the middle of a fierce storm, with all its sails out. Even though it looked calm, the sailors knew it was 1909, and seeing such a ship under those conditions was both strange and out of time. Hold on, because this gets even stranger. The officers said the ship had a reddish glow, like it was wrapped in mist. After this spooky meeting, no one heard from Guarata again. It disappeared along with the Mackin clan, crew, passengers, and everything on board, except for one person. Earlier on the trip, in Durban, one of the passengers from the Sayer got off the ship, troubled by a nightmare he had night after night for 3 nights. This dream scared him so much that it caused him to have a breakdown, and he left the ship convinced it was doomed. And it seems he might have been right. What do you think caused the disappearance of Guarata and the Mackin clan? Was it natural phenomena or something supernatural? Comment your theories, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries.